9/11 was a failure to keep people out of harm's way. 9/11 was a failure, systemic failure to protect the nation. But the system had been blinking red for years. Even George Tenet sent out a memo 3 years earlier saying the system is blinking red. We were sending out reports based on very advanced analysis. These, they mean business. Al-Qaeda and company means business, and they want to make it spectacular. We warned, I remember they're going to come back. We even made reference to airplanes. Senior duty officer, he says, yeah, I'm reading all your reports. Shaking his head at the same time, he says, who cares about some raghead spouting off fatwas in the desert? I said, what are we doing? We're violating the Fourth Amendment. Because I was also on the effort where you go to the FBI, the affidavits for a warrant.
How are you violating the Fourth Amendment?
Because they decided to implement a program right after 9/11 in which they completely bypassed even the very act that was put in place in 1978 because of all the abuses in the 70s.
The surveillance.
The Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Act, FISA, which had been modified, by the way, contrary to what General Michael V. Hayden said later, modified 5 times between 1978 and the 10th of September 2001 to keep up with the changes in technology. Why? We would never be surprised again, a la 7 December 1941 with the Japanese attack on Pearl Harbor.
What is your price? Because if your price is not your life, then you are for sale. Okay. We're back. We're back live in studio. This is a live show. I'm here. I'm joined by whistleblower Thomas Drake. Thomas Drake, who blew the whistle on the National Security Agency. And this is a really special treat. Usually we do these pre-recorded, but today we're doing it live. A 2-hour-long conversation with Thomas Drake. Ed Snowden, we all know who Edward Snowden is from 10 years ago, once said, if there hadn't been a Thomas Drake, there could not have been an Edward Snowden. And before there was Edward Snowden, and there's the quote on the screen, there was Thomas Drake, who blew the whistle on the National Security Agency's surveillance programs even before Edward Snowden did. He's one of history's most legendary whistleblowers. He went to his superiors. He did it the way you ought to do it, the Department of Defense Inspector General, and even congressional oversight committees. And for doing that, he was charged under the Espionage Act of 1917. This was in the year 2010, 3 years before Ed Snowden. And Drake's life was upended. They tried to destroy his life. His career ended. They took away his security clearance. His finances they tried to ruin. He spent $1 million on lawyers. Today, in today's dollars, that's more like $2 million. And the case nearly sent him to prison until it collapsed in 2011. At the time, he went on 60 Minutes. Edward Snowden was inspired by Thomas Drake. In fact, you saw the quote. But Drake says, and I'll ask him about this, that the government never was able to break him psychologically because of the inner strength that he developed starting as a child. What is most interesting about Thomas Drake, and I had dinner with him last night, is his take on human nature, the paradox of the human condition itself, his perspective on the banality of evil that is in fact inside of all of us, and perhaps most uncomfortable for you, the viewer, is inside of you, even though you may not want to admit it. Something that's inherent in our humanity. And I'm going to be talking with him about that. Thomas, thank you for being brave and being here with me here in West Palm Beach. It's nice to have you here, sir.
Yeah, well, thanks for having me. Thanks for inviting me onto your show.
I would first like to get your response to what you saw on the screen, those subcontractors and the scandal. And I think yourself, you have some experience with this, being a federal employee and witnessing. Can you tell me your reaction to that?
For me, it's just the continuing sad litany of the games that are played with contractors and their relationship with the government. And this is all white-collar activity, white-collar gamesmanship. It's finding ways in which I can actually enrich myself more than, let's say, normal. You can never make enough money. There's always more money to make. And hey, this is a mechanism by which people started using it as a pass-through or a cutout, as some would call it. to make even more money and taking advantage of what was probably originally a valid program in terms of disadvantage or women-owned or minority-owned, and now they're just using it to basically just rip people off. It's a racket. It really is a racket, and it's just one of any number of rackets that exist in the contracting world, if you're speaking just of that part of the world, within the federal government, and I'll even extend it to state government.
General contractor, subcontractors. You worked for Booz Allen Hamilton, is that
At
right?
one point in my time, yes, got up to management level.
Management level Booz, that's where Snowden worked too, Ed Snowden.
He did, yes.
Have you met Snowden?
I have met him, yes.
You've met him. And he says that you inspired him to do what he did. And I read this book, because I don't think you've written a book yet, but there's
Not
been
yet.
books written about you.
Yeah, a number of them, or chapters, or making direct references or extended passages about my case.
For those of you just tuning in, we're talking to Thomas Drake, legend, one of the greatest whistleblowers in American history. You may not know the name, but there were two ways in this book written about you. You didn't write the book, but it was about you and Ed Snowden. There were two ways that they talked about blowing the whistle. One is to go the traditional route, to go through Congress and so forth and so on. And the other is to kind of be a civil disobedient and go to journalists. Ed Snowden took the latter. You tried to do the right thing. Are those basically the only two ways one can blow the whistle? Or how does it work?
Well, there are formal channels by which you can blow the whistle, and government wrongdoing, fraud, violations of the law. And those channels exist. They're actually well advertised even within the system. They have posters hanging on, the walls as you're walking down the hall.
At the NSA, they had those
Even
posters?
at the NSA,
Wow.
yes.
Wow.
However, there are also exposure channels, because obviously if you're blowing the whistle, especially on your own agency, they're not going to take too kindly to you sort of airing the dirty laundry, even in secret.
It's kind of just the human nature, isn't it? Just people don't want their ego bruised if you tell the truth. The people that your superiors are not happy about that.
Telling your truth is extremely dangerous.
Telling the truth is dangerous.
Especially to power, especially abuse of power.
Abuse of power. But I mean, it does present kind of a quagmire, because we want to inspire people to come forward. It's almost like we have to find a third way, because the way that you did it, I mean, right now we have people in Washington that want me to come to them with all these people coming to me, and as I said to you last night, there's a little bit of a hesitation I have, because I don't know if I fully trust the government.
I wouldn't.
And I say that live on the air, in the spirit of honesty is the best policy, right? Even though perhaps I shouldn't say it, I find that the powers that be often want to know what I know. It's almost like they want to know what I know to be true more than they want to know, or more they want to reform.
In this realm, this kind of knowledge, especially it's knowledge that a lot of people would prefer not to go public, has a lot of power in itself. But there are a lot of people that benefit from this. Why would you want to upset the cart, as it were, as long as everybody's making something off the scam, off the racket, off the particular contract vehicle that's used, then why blow the whistle? Everybody's getting something from it, just some more, maybe getting a little bit more than others.
It's a $100 billion program, this program in particular. So what strikes me is that everyone is benefiting from it. I mean, it's like trickle-down economics.
Yes.
Congresswomen's wives, people in their mortgages, their kids' private school educations. You can't take away 100. It's 5% of the U.S. deficit off of this 8A.
This is why it's very hard to break these systems, because a lot of people are benefiting from it, all the way down to the lowest level, even if you're making what you would call a reasonable salary at the bottom level. But the people that really get hurt ultimately, although they're sort of the amorphous mass, is the American taxpayer. Or in this case, if you're talking about 8As, what about the people that really are at the bottom of the quote unquote the totem pole, right?
No, the actually people on the reservation who don't get the dividends.
The community, right?
It's like Animal Farm, George Orwell, the pigs in the barn. They get
scraps. It's crumbs.
Crumbs. You know, the name Binney in this book said this is one of the NSA 4+1. Can you just tell the people what the NSA 4+1 whistleblowing, what that was?
Yeah, we refer to ourselves as a gang. That's sort of between ourselves. So that was Bill Binney, who is one of the most celebrated, even within NSA while he worked there, as a crypto mathematician. And then there was Ed Loomis, who would actually build systems and deploy them. There was Kirk Wiebe, was like the business manager. And then there was Diane Rourke, who was actually had the oversight responsibility as the lead. She was the Republican staffer, but on the part of the permanent staff with the House Select Committee on Intelligence, permanent Select Committee.
Well, Bill Binney says it's all run by money. And that's something I told you last night. It took me, I'm 41, it took me like 40 years to figure that out. And I came to that conclusion when I made the movie Line in the Sand about the cartel. I just found it was all about money. Do you agree with that statement? It's about money?
Eisenhower actually warned the nation about this in his farewell address, which at the time was hardly even noted, but it's become quite famous in terms of what he said about the military-industrial complex. He knew what he kind of unleashed in the 1950s. And his concern was that it would end up being a controlling mechanism in government. It would be a corrupting mechanism in government. And he was basically, in his own way, was blowing the whistle on himself and his own 8 years in office as the President of the United States, because he saw what was starting to already happen in the early 60s. And remember, it's guaranteed income. I mean, this is the thing. This sort of even upsets what you'd call a traditional free enterprise / capitalist system, where now you're getting guaranteed basically handouts from the government. And again, you just get to pass it all around. So the incentive in this case is simply to make more and more money. In fact, it gets so, in my own experience, it can even get to the point where it doesn't really matter what you deliver. All you do is it's performative. It becomes an art form. You just end up showing best effort. And that's like Blazing Saddles, the movie.
You mean the government contractor?
The contractor. Because remember, the government is increasingly relying on contractors to do work or to produce and develop things that are supposed to provide for the common defense. I mean, that's one of the two principal responsibilities of government in the preamble of the Constitution. Promote the general welfare, we sometimes forget about that, but also provide for the common defense. In this case, the common defense has to do with the common interest. It's like self-interest. We're just going to milk the system for as much. I remember sitting in a meeting when I was with Booz Allen. First level, I got up to first level management. They brought us into this room. So we've been newly appointed as managers, or promoted managers. He says, hey, we'll sell this, and they, use a couple of swear words to anybody that's willing to pay. So if you sell it to one part of the government, just repackage it and sell it to another part of the government for an even higher price.
This is James O'Keefe. You know me for exposing the truth and holding the corrupt elite responsible and accountable. However, today I want to tell you about protecting your own freedom, your finances. Before you buy any gold or silver, hear this. We're going through one of the biggest financial shifts of our lifetime. De-dollarization. Nations like China, Russia, and Saudi Arabia are pulling away from the US dollar. And that threatens your savings and retirement security. Legendary investor Ray Dalio warns skyrocketing debt, relentless money printing, and a weakening dollar are all part of a dangerous cycle that could impact you. That's why more Americans are turning to real assets like physical gold and silver. Gold just surged past $3,700 per ounce, and momentum is building. I've partnered with veteran-owned American Independence Gold to help you take action. Open a qualifying account today and get up to $10,000 in bonus gold and our free gold protection guide. And here's the best part. A portion of every sale supports Tunnel to Towers and Wounded Warriors. Freedom isn't given, it's secured. This is James O'Keefe. As always, this is not financial advice. Always check with your licensed financial advisor before you invest. It seems like I've got so much to talk to you about. And for those just tuning in, again, we're doing a live television hit here. So we are talking to Thomas Drake, who blew the whistle on the National Security Agency. You think what you do is tough, blowing the whistle on 8A pass-through schemes? This guy went to war not by his own volition, but he didn't think he was going to war. He thought he was going to do the right thing. With the National Security Agency in Fort Meade, Maryland. If you think you have issues, and this guy's here and is still alive to tell the tale, it seems like it's just like we're fighting it. I think the bottom line up front is it seems like we're fighting against naked self-interest. That seems to be one of the things that you're against, just the idea of human nature itself. Can you talk about that?
Extraordinarily naked self-interest.
You talk about that.
Right, because you basically get up in the morning and say, how can I acquire more? How can I get more? How can I get one over on somebody else? And hey, that's part of the game. If I get to play in it and I win, then there's a huge payoff.
So you
that's
are not
part.
willing
That's part. It is a form of gambling in part, but this case, you're actually using taxpayer money to do so.
But you were not willing to play the game.
I couldn't play the game. There's right and wrong. This is where you get into sort of the morality of it all, the ethics of it. I mean, we're talking billions and billions of dollars being sent every year to the national security establishment, of which the National Security Agency is part of it. You would think, especially when you're a secret organization, there'd be even higher level accountability as to what are you getting for the money. I could not remain silent when it came to billions and billions in fraud, waste, and abuse. I certainly couldn't remain silent in terms of the abuse of the Fourth Amendment, in terms of
the First
the surveillance
and Fourth
regime.
Amendment are in your position. You've said that those are the most important ones.
If you go back to the very basis for the American Revolution, the thing that actually makes us American, I would argue, is encapsulated in the First and Fourth Amendment.
Why do you believe that to be just the American founding is so?
It's cornerstone in terms of, remember, all the usurpations that were identified in the Declaration of Independence against King George III. Mm-hmm. It was fundamental. You couldn't speak out. You couldn't freely publish. And if they came, one of the officers of the crown could show with a piece of paper and literally take away your effects, your papers, or even your person, just with a piece of paper. You had no due process. There was no protection against that. It was raw power dominating you as a colonial.
And you and I both have this in common. We've both been raided by the feds. And in your case, they had the guns drawn. I think your son, did your son answer the door?
They had guns. They didn't actually draw them, but they were ready to bash the door down if it hadn't been answered in the next few seconds. Yes.
And you had went to the Baltimore Sun newspaper in the year 2006.
Well, ultimately, see, this is key.
Okay.
I went through every channel that existed in terms of the formal disclosure channels. I started with my own supervisor, who happened to be the number 3 at NSA, the Signals Intelligence Directorate. I went to the Inspector General. They had their own investigation internally, but they're beholden to the top deck, the director and the deputy directors. I didn't go anywhere.
It's kind of a, pardon me for interjecting, It's kind of a paradox that you have these whistleblower channels, but ultimately this is there's a separation of powers. There's Congress, then there's the executive branch, but ultimately these people report to someone up there, right? So continue.
But even in Congress, I went to both congressional committees.
Which committees did you go to?
Both the Senate, the Permanent Select Committee on Intelligence, it's called the SISI for short, and the House Permanent Select Committee on Intelligence.
About 20 years ago, 2006, 2007?
This was in that 2000, well, actually even before that. But when I say I went to there, I actually went under a statute that is supposed to protect you. As it was a formal channel called the Intelligence Community Whistleblower Protection Act. It was an extension of the Inspector General Act. It allowed me at that time, they've modified it since, I could literally go directly to the committee because they had oversight because of all the abuses of power during the 1970s that came out in all those hearings, Church, Pike, Bell Abzug, Rockefeller Commission.
We're walking a fine line here because so many people watching this program are on the inside and they're on the precipice of doing the thing. And we're going to talk for a couple hours about your story. and I'm trying to walk a fine line by telling the truth, but also trying to inspire people. I think the world's changed a little bit since you did what you did. This was like under the Bush administration. Instagram didn't exist. Twitter didn't exist.
That's right.
The media was different. Like the Baltimore Sun, I mean, newspapers don't even exist anymore. So things are kind of changing a little bit. But let's go back to that time period, 2004, 2005, 2006, 2007. You go to the congressional subcommittees. What exactly, we know Ed Snowden, what he did. What were you blowing the whistle on at the NSA at the time?
3 primary areas. The 9/11 intelligence failures and subsequent cover-up at NSA, which was quite extraordinary. In fact, they kept a whole lot from all the formal investigations, both the congressional investigations, and there was 2 of them that I was a material witness on. Thousands of pages of documents were given to the investigators. I was even I had to do depositions where you're giving oral testimony as well. Mm-hmm. I also was part of a DODIG investigation involving the largest, basically at the time, it was by far the largest contracted program in NSA called Trailblazer.
Trailblazer.
And there was requirements for Trailblazer, but most all those requirements had been satisfied by, in part, by another program called Thin Thread.
Thin Thread. These sound like out of a Jason Bourne movie, by the way.
there is that element to all of
Treadstone.
this. There is the sort of a Jason Bourne element to all this without all the violence.
And briefly, what is Trailblazer and what is Thin Thread?
Well, let's go back just a little bit and then accelerate forward. So the internet age explodes in the 90s. Extraordinary period. Extraordinary. But it was now it's really the digital age had existed for a while, but now the internet had existed for a while. But now there's this rapid transition from the analog era of the information age to the digital age, the digital era. Massive amounts of data, because it's far easier to generate data in the digital space than it was in the analog space. NSA knew, this is right after the Cold War, they actually identified the challenge they faced with the digital age. How do you, it's one thing to collect all this, but how do you make sense of it? All the methods they had used and had been quite successful at back in the 50s and 60s and on well into the 70s and 80s were coming up short. So they knew they had a problem. Well, at NSA, because it's much more of an engineering organization in terms of, hey, we got a problem, let's solve it. Classic, necessity is the mother of invention. That famous phrase in terms of American industry, going back to the industrial age. So sure enough, small teams solved the big, what we refer to as the big data problem. That was Thin Thread. It was ready to go well prior to 9/11. Mm-hmm. But it only cost about, when it was developed, a little over $3 million. But in the year 2000, 2001, there were some preliminaries, just to make a long story short. They awarded a multi-billion-dollar program to SCIC and a bunch of subprimes. Almost $4 billion, or the original program, prior to 9/11. That was their answer. And instead of relying on the ingenuity and the best of American inventiveness, they said, you know what? We're going to buy the solution. We're not going to make it. But the kicker for me, which is still to this day surreal, that solution had already been made and was being rapidly improved. But they decided we're going to go out to industry, kind of like we're going to do in part what was done during World War II with the Manhattan Project. But we're just going to spend a whole boatload of money on some contractors and they'll figure it out. Now you're the contractor. And you can imagine, if your eyes get really big because you're seeing massive amounts of money that you're going to be able to live off of for the next several years.
And Trailblazer?
They never developed anything. Nothing was ever put in the field. And they had shut down. This was right before 9/11, although Trailblazers went ongoing for a number of years. Because remember, after 9/11, the Congress basically comes to NSA and says, how much money do you need? As if more money was going to be the answer. In most cases, it's never about more money.
What is it about?
It's about solving the problem. Why do you need, but if you want to just make money, yeah, we'll find ways to spend money. So you're incentivized not to solve the problem.
Incentives are not aligned.
No, you're incentivized to keep the money flowing.
Right. So at some point, you decide, I'm going to go to the government channels to tell me through your mind state at the time. I'm going to go to whistleblower avenues.
All that existed, starting with
Where did you
NSA
start
itself.
first?
The number 3 that I reported to.
That
who
was your
actually was
boss?
my hiring manager.
Your hiring manager.
She was the signals intelligence director at the time.
And what was her reaction to your disclosures?
She didn't want to hear about it.
And then what did you do?
Well, I could have just sort of, okay, no, nothing's going to happen. You know, I can just sit back and ride out the rest of my time at NSA, get a government pension, and ride off into the sunset. Right? Even after 9/11.
And what year was this exactly?
This was the fall of 2001.
This is the fall of 2001.
Fall of 2001. First day on the job was 9/11.
Your first day at work
Yes.
was 9/11?
Yeah. After I went through all the processing and everything else, the first day reporting to my new duty station was literally dark 30. It was actually 0500 in the morning, Zulu time, right?
Wow.
It was
Wow.
0500,
You can't make
24-hour
this up.
clock
Truth is
military
stranger
time.
than fiction.
Yeah, well, there's a whole lot of truth here that it may sound and probably is stranger than fiction. It'd be difficult to write the Hollywood
You
scripts.
can't. Yeah, they would laugh at Netflix if you wrote this down.
I'm in a meeting and the 2 towers are hit, and then the Pentagon, shortly thereafter, it's like, I remember sitting. It was in the Legislative Affairs office. I remember standing up. So my chair was up against the door that goes into the outer hall. The director of the Signals Intelligence Directorate was actually giving a briefing to a TAG team. It's a technical advisory group for the SISI, the Senate Select Committee. They really had concerns about what the country, what was national security going to receive for all this money that's being spent on Trailblazer. And NSA was in fact challenged to explain what would the country receive for all that money. So once again, there was this meeting that was set up. Well, I remember when the executive assistant came in and said the second tower had been hit, I stood up and said, America's under attack. The next 4 months are a blur for me.
A blur.
Until I was with family in New Orleans celebrating Mardi Gras. That was the first time I felt somewhat normal again as a human being.
What was that 4 months like for you? Just working heads down?
Unbelievably compressed.
Just lots of work.
Staggering amounts, tasking. You're trying to figure out, because you knew this was more, it was not just an everyday crisis. This was going to be a multi-year crisis.
What
and of
did you
course,
do?
all kinds of pronouncements were made by Bush and then Cheney going to the dark side, Cofer Black saying we're going to take the gloves off.
What did you do for the NSA?
I was hired in literally the title originally. I had multiple positions, was senior change leader. So I'm in the operations side of NSA. This is the active side. This is the side of NSA that goes out, collects signals, makes sense of them.
So what were your duties?
My duties was that I actually had a small leadership and communications team that reported directly to the signals intelligence director. So we were responsible for basically setting up communication systems to keep everybody informed. We were advising as well in terms of how to respond to what happened on 9/11. We were having to deal with questions that were already starting to come from Congress. We were also, hey, what else is there in the fight? What else can we put into the fight to deal with terrorism? We didn't know. Remember, right after 9/11, they didn't know if there was other cells that were in operation. People forget. I mean, it's hard for me now as you were going back. This is it's 25th anniversaries next year. It's hard to believe.
So those 4 months were a blur for you. You go to your supervisor. She shrugs her shoulders. And then
within just days of 9/11. The reason, this is critical. 9/11 was a failure to keep people out of harm's way. 9/11 was a failure, systemic failure to protect the nation. But the system had been blinking red for years. Even George Tenet sent out a memo 3 years earlier saying the system is blinking red. There was all kinds of indications, but this is post-Cold War. NSA was still trying to sort out like who's the next threat, who's the enemy. This is clearly a non-state actor, transnational, which I was very familiar with because I had worked in a previous assignment as a commissioned officer in the Navy down at the Pentagon in the Alert Center, the National Military Joint Intelligence Center, sitting on the terrorism desk in 1993 when they tried to drop the World Trade Center towers the first time. 6 people died.
remember
I
that.
remember we were on the desk. It was a small team. We're in the alert center. We were sending out reports based on very advanced analysis. They mean business. Al-Qaeda and company means business. They're not going to rest. They're going to come back, and they want to make it spectacular. We warned. I remember they're going to come back. We even made reference to airplanes. They'll use everything possible. So I'm sitting there literally on shift, and the J2, who was one of the general, he's a general, but he was considered the chief military intelligence officer. He reported directly to the Joint Chiefs of Staff. He comes down because he's been reading the reports that we're sending out from the terrorism desk. He's sitting there talking to the senior duty officer. He says, "Yeah, I'm reading all your reports." Shaking his head at the same time. He says, "Who cares about some raghead spouting off fatwas in the desert?"
What year was that?
1993.
So about 8 years before 9/11.
This is after they tried to drop the Trade Center towers the first time.
Imagine if you had that on video. Imagine if you had that on video.
You can imagine what I was thinking on 9/11 when everything unfolded.
You were feeling what Jeffrey Y. Gann described as kind of righteous indignation. Would you characterize that?
That's a fair statement.
Righteous indignation.
But see, the warnings, the frustration, you probably even see it in my body right now. I was classically trained as an intelligence analyst. I was a crypto-linguist in the Air Force for a number of years. I flew on reconnaissance platforms like the RC-135. I was a mission crew supervisor on an electronic warfare mission called Compass Call. That was on an EC-130H. It was actually, when I came back from overseas in England, I was stationed in Arizona at Davis-Monthan Air Force Base. We were classically trained. We had extraordinary powers during the Cold War in terms of collection of intelligence and making sense of it. We were listening in on any number of countries and across any number of networks and picking up signals from all kinds of different devices, push-to-talk radios, you name it, right? Across the the electromagnetic spectrum, high-end radars, all that. An amazing system that was set up in those decades after World War II. Why? We would never be surprised again, a la 7 December 1941 with the Japanese attack on Pearl Harbor. We will never again experience a surprise electronically. So we were trained, what are the norms, what's standard behavior, operating behavior of adversary nations or nations you have an interest in, and then anything that's different, you report on it. And depending on the level, it could get to the point where if it's serious enough, you would have to be on the president's desk within 10 minutes. He was at the top of what was referred to when I was in the business, the National Command Authorities. That was sort of a euphemism for the president and sort of the immediate Joint Chiefs of Staff and the others, National Security Council, et cetera, the combatant commanders, et cetera, are all in the loop. I was classically trained. Here we failed. We literally failed. But that's not how the leadership took it.
That's not how the leadership took it.
I'm walking around. This is right after 9/11. The workforce is utterly crushed. We could refer to people that did the real work as the workforce. Utterly. They knew.
Morale was low.
Incredibly low, because it's like, oh my gosh.
Workforce of the NSA, you mean?
Workforce at NSA.
So let's just go to that. We've got so much to talk about. Let's just go to that moment.
Sure.
So you go to the supervisor, then what happens? Who do you go to next?
Oh, so I said, what are we doing? We're violating the Fourth Amendment. Because I was also on the effort where you go to the FBI, the affidavits for a warrant.
How are you violating the Fourth Amendment?
Because they decided to implement a program right after 9/11 in which they completely bypassed even the very act that was put in place in 1978 because of all the abuses in the 70s.
The surveillance.
The Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Act, FISA, which had been modified, by the way, contrary to what General Michael V. Hayden said later, modified 5 times between 1978 and the 10th of September 2001 to keep up with the changes in technology.
Who did you go to next after your supervisor?
Well, because I kept going back to the director of the Signals Intelligence Directorate. She says, you got to go talk. If you got an issue with this, go talk to the general counsel.
So you talked to the general counsel.
So this program, which at the time had a name that was classified. It's not classified anymore, and they've changed the name. It was called Stellar Wind. Stellar Wind was a way off the books, super deep state secret. It was one of the deepest state secrets.
Was it in like Dick Cheney's safe, or was this the one in Cheney's safe, or was this?
Well, that was the authorization, basically the presidential finding signed by Bush, basically with Cheney hovering over him.
Okay, so this was a secret.
They wouldn't even give a copy to NSA. That's how sensitive this program was. They knew they were violating the law. They knew that.
And you were
but
witness
it didn't
to
matter.
This. You were witness to this.
I was witness. This is what I found out. I discovered all this. But the program was so classified, the vast majority of NSA would have never even known about it. It was in a super, super specialized compartment. The program itself was its own compartment.
Who did you go to next?
The general counsel.
And then what happened? What
and
did they say?
This was my moment of truth. This was the first week in October.
Of 2001?
2001.
And what did they say?
And I didn't know at the time about the secret authorization letter, the presidential finding that Addington kept in his safe. Didn't know that.
That who had in the safe?
David Addington.
Who's
chief,
that?
Basically, he was like the counsel to Cheney.
The lawyer
Very
for
interesting
Dick Cheney
character on
had
all
the
this.
thing
He was
in
a
his
lawyer,
safe.
yeah. So
So
there
you
were
were
all
messing-
kinds of lawyers here.
So what did the general counsel do?
Well, he was one of the few people read in to the program. They call it read in. He was the one that was aware of the program.
Mm-hmm.
And he said, we are the executive agent for the White House. It's all been approved.
The NSA is an executive branch agency.
No. NSA is the executive agent for the program, approved by the White House. It's all legal. Don't ask any more questions.
It's kind of like the Nixon Frost interview.
Yes,
when
exactly.
When the guy goes, Richard Nixon says it's legal. The president can. What did he say? What was the quote from Nixon?
If the president does it, it's legal.
If the president
it's not
does
illegal.
it, it's legal.
If the president does it, it's not illegal.
And there are legitimate debates even right now about how much power the executive has. And there's
extraordinary power, especially when it comes to executive privilege.
What do you think the Constitution? What is your opinion about? I don't want to get too far off track, but what do you?
Article 2 powers?
Yes. What is your opinion?
They're vast, including commander in chief, but they're not unlimited.
They're not unlimited.
They're not unlimited.
And Nixon was saying they're unlimited.
Remember, I'm going to say this, even with the current president, and this all came out basically of the 70s. Even a president is not above the law. Remember, the president resigned his office. Nixon literally resigned his office in 1974. The president himself takes a special oath: preserve, protect, and defend the Constitution. There's no one else in the executive branch that takes that special oath: preserve, protect, and defend. I had taken an oath, and this is critical to understanding why I could not remain silent, even in the fall of 2001. I took an oath 5 times in my government career, twice in the Air Force, once at CIA, once in the Navy, and then again at NSA as a senior executive. That oath is to the Constitution, to a piece of paper. It's the foundational basis for how we govern ourselves in America.
But everyone else took the oath also.
Sure did, and the president a special oath at the inauguration.
But your NSA colleagues took the oath.
Sure did.
Your general counsel took the
Yes.
oath. Your supervisor took the oath.
Same oath: support and defend the Constitution.
Is that what your oath was? Support and defend it?
Yes.
At the NSA, that's what
Remember,
you said?
piece of paper. It's not to support and defend NSA. It's not to support and defend the president. It's not to support and defend the violations of the Constitution. It's not to support and defend covering up, especially with respect to wrongdoing. It is an oath. I mean, this is sort of it's central. I mean, remember, you look at the preamble of the Constitution. This is for me, people say, oh, you're naive. I was actually literally told this on the inside. Tom, the Constitution is a quaint piece of paper.
Who said that? Who said that to you? But you can't say who said that. One of your people at the NSA said that to you.
Quaint piece of paper. Exigent conditions apply. This is the lawyer in the office of the general counsel's office. Exigent conditions apply. Emergency conditions apply.
All animals are equal, but some animals are more equal than others.
Well, oh boy, now you're quoting one of my all-time favorite, as much as it's dystopian, but George Orwell.
But it's getting to the heart of the
yes, it is.
double think or
9/11 ended up in essence being, I was going to say, a positive flag, not a false flag, to engage in activity that was entirely prohibited or constrained by the Constitution. But remember what Jefferson said about the Constitution. The chains of the Constitution bind us. Remember what Madison said about ambition meeting ambition. That was part of the checks and balances.
What interests me most, Thomas, about you,
Yes.
and I think what interests all the viewers, and I'm not looking at the comments, is that, but you actually did something about it, and everyone believe, not everyone, the majority of Americans, I mean, for those who are not ignorant, for those who have a brain, probably mostly agree with what you're saying. But people participate. One of the things you said to me last night, what was the phrase? Performative democracy. And we're going to get to this idea of a performative democracy, but people participate in the phony, fake, fugazi deal. You take an oath, it's just a piece of paper. But what interests me about you is, and this is something that Ed Snowden said, quote, we had a guy, Thomas Drake, this is from Edward Snowden, we had a guy, Drake, who did absolutely everything right. He placed his faith in the system. He saw the warrantless wiretapping of hundreds of millions of Americans while at the NSA. He saw corruption in procurement process, in standards adoptions, and things like that. He brought it to the Inspector General. He brought it to Congress. And rather than protecting him, they actively retaliated against him in the most public, aggressive way to send a message to everybody that things were different now. That's what Ed Snowden said about you. And they went after you in the most aggressive way. Before we get to the performative democracy, how did they go after you in the most aggressive way?
Well, all these investigations unfold over a number of years, but the reprisal, the retaliation against me started happening quite early on. I was marked early on. I was already considered a troublemaker. I was supposed to just play the game. Remember, I have been hired in from the outside. There's about a dozen of us hired in from the outside prior to 9/11 to quote unquote stir up, shake up the gene pool, as they would say. If you're an outsider, especially with a highly rigidified, I'll use a fancy word, sclerotic institution, the last thing you want is somebody being hired in from the outside, or a dozen or so being hired in to quote unquote change things, because you might make us look bad psychologically. So you protect yourself. The cultural white blood cells kick in to get rid of the threat. We were threats. They did everything possible to prevent us from doing our jobs. But because we were hired in at a senior level, it was, other than being increasingly isolating you, it was very difficult, even at that level, to do your job. They just wanted to make sure you would get so frustrated you would leave. And most actually did. Early on, left. And I remember people in their exit interview privately would tell me, they won't let me do my job. Here's the trigger though. 2005, there's an article published in the New York Times. James Risen, Eric Lichtblau, revealing for the first time after 4+ years the existence of what was then referred to as a warrantless wiretapping program, which was just the tip of the iceberg. The government went apoplectic. 2 weeks later, guess what they initiate? The DOJ, Department of Justice, a massive national security leak criminal investigation. I knew when that article was published, even though I was never a source for the New York Times, as much as the government later
Somebody
alleged
else was a source.
Oh, they had upwards of a dozen people.
Were those people in the NSA?
I don't know that, but I certainly was not one of them.
I suspect that. How else?
There were others. Well, there was others that would have known about the program, or at least indications of it, if they worked within the Department of Justice or in the secret court. There's a secret FISA court, and there's actually an appeals court.
Maybe it were those people.
Right? Or FBI.
Okay.
It's possible
people were talking to the New York Times,
yes,
that were not you.
But it was not me. That's right.
But at some point, you do reach out to a Baltimore Sun reporter. Eventually, in May.
But see, doing that, that's the third rail. For me to go to the press, I was well aware what happened to Daniel Ellsberg with the Pentagon Papers.
For those who are not familiar with Daniel Ellsberg, famous Pentagon whistleblower, the Pentagon Papers went to the Supreme Court. And he also was a kind of civil disobedient.
Very much so.
Yes.
And he was actually part of the Pentagon Papers study, this multi-year study and I'll just shorten what the study reflected, contrary to all public pronouncements, the bright and shining lie of our involvement in Vietnam going all the way back to when we took over from the French. So that's when I actually touched the third rail. Now, interestingly enough, it was not contrary to what Scott Pelley actually asked me in 60 Minutes many years later. He said, well, isn't it like against the law to go to the press? Actually, it's not. But I was in violation of an administrative policy, which was having unauthorized contact with a reporter.
Right. And that's when Dick Cheney reportedly ordered that that the leaker, whoever they are, be found and punished.
Based on the New York Times article.
Based on that Risen
Find
article.
and fry whoever, burn them.
So you said, quote, this is at the time, I figured I would lose my job, Drake said, quote, but I could live with that. This was about something much bigger than me. I served in the military and knew that if I had to, I'd put my life on the line for a greater cause of liberty and freedom. But again, most people don't think that way. That's not how most people operate. And you're still here. I mean, you're not in some hole. I mean, you fared better than Julian Assange, I suppose. You're physically here. They didn't kill you. You're still alive. I mean,
No.
you went through absolute hell, and we'll get to that in a second.
I did. I had long conversations with Ellsberg.
Okay.
I considered him my whistleblower father. We became close friends.
When did you reach out? When did you guys connect?
I was introduced to him right after I was indicted by the government in April of 2010. It was in May. In May of 2010 is when I first met Ellsberg. But remember, I grew up, my civic awakening was the 1970s. I remember sitting in social studies class watching all this unfold on the news and in the newspapers at the time.
Your awakening, but most people who lived, again, I hear you, but what is it about you?
There was a bigger world out there. I was on, probably because of things that happened to me even when I was younger. What does this all mean? Why do we even exist? Why is there life? Why were we born? Why do we die? It was like this quest for the truth was this.
Is that something that God gave you? Is that something that your environment gave you? Is that something your parents gave you? Where does that come from within you?
I think it began consciously. The first event was a near-death experience at 4 years of age.
And near-death, and you've had a couple of near-death experiences.
Several.
And what was the first one?
4 years old.
Yeah.
I was living in Austin. My father just recently retired, career Air Force officer. He was a World War II veteran, sole survivor. He used to fly missions for what was a precursor to the CIA, the OSS.
Your father was with the OSS?
Yes. 41 missions.
Wow.
They were in Southern Europe. Plane got hit, caught fire. He was the only man that got out of the plane. The only one that survived.
He was behind survivor's guilt, as they say.
Behind the lines for 6 months, lost 50 pounds until he hooked up with the British Underground, and then they flew him out. It forever altered the rest of his life.
Your father had PTSD?
Severe.
At 4 years old, what was your near-death experience?
So I was a very healthy child from the time I was born in 1957. Early 1962, I come down with a debilitating fever. Long story short, I end up being rushed to the hospital. This is what I remember. I'm on fire. It literally felt like, why? My temperature was 106 plus, approaching 107. So anybody that's in the medical profession, nurse, technician, doctor, knows if you have a body temperature over 106, that's not good at all. Things start breaking down at that level. So what did they do? They packed me in ice. I felt a little cooler, but it certainly wasn't cold. And I can only say it this way, and I realize what I'm about to share with you, and I realize we're live, but I'm just going to share it. This is nonlinear because you can't really explain this. I had an experience. What I remember is I'm hovering above my body. There's basically the silver cord, is the only way I can describe it, hooking me kind of in a soul state to my physical body. And when I look above me, there's this bright light. It's like this, It's almost like a white porthole. It's like a white hole that's like concentric circles.
Mm-hmm.
And then I look down. There's all these people, the doctors, right, are around me, sitting in this bucket of ice. And the next thing I know, I'm back in my body.
At 4 years old,
At 4 years old, I was dying.
You experienced
I was in that state where you're about to disappear.
And did you rest? That means you wrestled with your own mortality.
Yes.
And in wrestling with your own mortality,
Why am I still here?
You started to ask the questions. Why am I here?
So I went to I'll just say the ends of the earth and the heavens to seek out the Lord.
So you're a Christian.
Yes, I am.
There are a lot of people that are Christians, but many of them perhaps don't wrestle with their own mortality in that way. Or it was that experience that you went through that made you wrestle with it?
It led me over the years, with a lot of hiccups, to accepting Jesus Christ as my personal Savior. That there is a Creator God, and that there is a master plan that's working out here on Earth, a privileged planet.
And you had other near-death experiences.
I guess one wasn't enough.
We'll get to those later on in the conversation, but I also want to read. This is public information. It's in a book, and I know this will probably make us feel uncomfortable, but this is James O'Keefe, Price is My Life show, so we're going to go there. Quote, nevertheless, Drake said that the government never broke him psychologically. What was the German word, by the way? That describes...
so I didn't give you a little bit of my history. Zersetzung.
Well, but before we get into your history,
sorry.
Zersetzung means what?
Zersetzung is, in German, it's actually a term that means chemical decomposition.
Chemical decomposition. To break someone?
Break something. Well, if you do it psychologically to a being, this is the Stasi, the secret police, the state police, the sword and the shield of the DDR, which was the East Germany at the time, which was this weird mix of sort of communism and fascism in one. But they were a police state. The Stasi were the sword and the shield of the state. They would routinely torture dissidents or those who fell out of favor with the state. But they realized you can only keep pounding up on somebody for so long because you're not going to get anything valuable from them. So what they would resort to is psychological torture.
In order to break you.
To break you, to decompose you, to
decompose not your physically, but your will. Your will.
Fragment your very being.
Fragment your being.
Emil Durkheim talked about, there's a word, it's the word that describes this as anomie. It's a process by which you are fully separated from yourself.
Do you think that the powers that be tried to do this to you?
Yes, even though they wouldn't have used those terms, but yes.
And
I'm well aware of that.
And you're saying today that they were not successful.
They weren't. I wasn't going to let them break me no matter what.
How did you?
Well, they were not going to break. Remember, I'm here by the grace of God. Okay, my faith is unbreakable when it comes to the Creator. There is no way at the deepest level of myself that they would ever be able to take that away from me as a human being, as a child of God.
But that's what most people watching actually fear. They do break.
Most do. I'm all too aware of that in terms of history.
And is the reason you didn't? Well, let me read something to you because it says.
Remember, but you also have to remember, if you go back to the fall of 2001, people say, "Well, you shouldn't have said anything. You didn't make the decision. You weren't the president. You weren't Cheney. You weren't Hayden. You weren't even the general counsel. Yes, you're a senior executive. Yes, you have responsibilities, but they weren't your responsibilities. So why speak out or speak up? You know why? Because if I had remained silent, guess what? I would now be participating actively with the knowledge that I was participating in the subversion of the Constitution of the United States."
And most people do that wittingly.
Well, I had people that explained to me why. They came to me this years after everything happened, right? They said, "I agree with you, Tom. I agree with you about the corruption and the malfeasance and all that, right? And even the warrantless surveillance program. I can't do what you did." Why? This individual was in tears.
I can't do what you did is what they said.
I can't do what you did. And he was in tears when he shared this with me. I am married. I have a mortgage. I have retirement. I've got kids going to college. I cannot jeopardize any of that.
What was your response? What are your
I
responses?
understood. I understand. There were very few people.
You don't really fight them. You just say,
No.
I hear you.
No. If anything, I'm sympathetic.
You're sympathetic.
Yes.
But you too had a wife, didn't you?
Yes.
You too
I had
children.
I had a 12-year-old.
You had a 12-year-old child. Did you have a house, a mortgage,
Yes.
a rent payment?
Had all that.
So you had all the things that they had.
Yes. I even had my retirement on the line.
Your pension.
Career, all that.
And they'd take your pension from you?
I was 5.5 years from a full pension.
So you never got your pension?
No.
Here's what you wrote. Here's what was written about you. Quote, Drake said, this is a journalist named Mark Hertzgaard.
He interviewed me extensively for the book.
And would you say this is a fair book about you?
Yes.
Drake said that the government never broke him psychologically. Perhaps in part because of the inner strength that Drake had developed as a child. Drake did not volunteer the insight, but when I asked, he confirmed that part of his emotional resilience and his sense of justice stemmed from growing up as the son of a violent father. Quote, my dad used to beat me up, Drake acknowledged, but he would never get the essence of me. But he would never get to the essence of me. No matter how badly I was abused, I had to hide myself at times in gym class. Quote, the worst part of it was in 5th, 6th, and 7th grade. I would never take my clothes off in front of the other kids.
Yep.
The belt was his favorite. What I did have was my mind and my spirit. As I read more history and pondered it, I saw that it wasn't just me who was treated unjustly. It wasn't just me that was treated unjustly, and I had to ask, why do we treat each other this way?
That was a fundamental question I had to wrestle with, including wrestling the same question with God himself. Why? Why?
Why are we so ugly to each other?
I became so acutely sensitive to abuse of power and injustice, literally from inside my own family. But then I saw it happening in school as I got older, in high school. Kids are getting picked on, kids that are being bullied. Because I looked normal, at that point I had basically grown out of a lot of the illnesses I had for the decade earlier. I looked normal, right? Normal, right? There was nothing about me that would, I didn't have 4 eyes, I didn't have anything that would call attention to myself. Oh yeah, okay, so I wore wingtip shoes like my father did in high school. But I would stand up for the ones that couldn't stand up or speak for themselves. That's where it started.
It seems like you had a confluence of things happen to you.
Yes.
You had this near-death experience. You had your father, who was a veteran and a combat veteran who had PTSD.
He used to beat the crap out of me.
And you asked yourself, this led you to understand your own mortality?
Because I was always living on the edge. I didn't tell you how sick I was. I would spend weeks away from school. They would have to send homework to my house. Or my brother, who was a year younger, he would actually bring work home to me so I could finish it. I'd be bedridden for weeks at a time. I had this humidifier because I could hardly breathe. Part of the problem is I developed all kinds of respiratory ailments.
It was a confluence of events for you. You were a mathematical genius, a military man with a family, a violent father. But your father also, you guys grew, towards the end of your life, he saw what happened to you. The father that beat you, the World War II veteran, the OSS the pilot who survived, had survivor's guilt. This guy, when this happened to you, when the feds raided your home, when they indicted you, your father, what was his view of things?
He was having a hard time dealing with it.
Why is that?
Well, I had reconciled with him years earlier. I accepted, you never forget. I forgave my father. I'll say it that way.
You forgave him.
I forgave my father. I couldn't, remember, if I hold on to the abuse, guess what happens?
Not healthy.
That's right. Not at all. So years earlier, I had forgiven him. So I was now a golden child. Remember, I'd been in the military. I had served faithfully for, if we're talking military plus my Navy time as a commissioned officer was approaching 15 years. Now I'm a senior executive in the government. And he couldn't understand, why are they going after his son? He wrote a letter to then the congressperson for his district. He was living in a retirement home in San Antonio. And you know what the response was? Not in my jurisdiction. He didn't want to do anything to do with it. The problem was I've been charged under the Espionage Act. We're going to get to that. I've been charged on the Espionage Act.
Which is ridiculous.
Well, but so was Ellsberg. He was the first American, non-spy American, charged for quote-unquote having gone to the press.
It's just the paradox of the whole dynamic is that you're trying to follow the oath, and in the country that you love, the American flag is sitting behind you. And I relate to this because they raided me. I'm a journalist. And they raided you, and you're a guy who's against the warrantless searches, and they charge you with the one thing that hurts more than anything else, which is to accuse you of espionage against your own country.
I was literally, they were asserting that I had betrayed my own country. I was a Benedict Arnold, and I was a Benedict Arnold because I was an insider threat.
That's the worst thing they could
That
possibly say
harmed
about
the national security. And it wasn't just serious harm, okay? It wasn't just damage. It wasn't just serious damage. It was exceptionally grave damage. There was no higher. If you go into the executive orders that govern all that, it was the highest form of damage. In fact, at one point, they even said that I would have the blood of American soldiers on my hands.
This is the worst possible thing that can happen if you're just tuning in. We are live with the legendary NSA whistleblower, Thomas Drake. Edward Snowden said, quote, "If there hadn't been a Thomas Drake, there could never have been an Edward Snowden." This is a guy who's a pioneer who went through the worst type of hell you could possibly imagine and who's still alive to tell the tale. And I am talking to him about how and why he is the way that he is to hopefully inspire all of you. When we come back after 1 or 2 minutes, we do understand that our journalism is expensive. It costs a lot of money. The investigative reporting that we've done, particularly on the 8A program, took us 6 months. So you're going to hear from one of our sponsors in a second. But when we come back, this is even more damning. In retrospect, the whistleblowing experiences of Drake and Snowden were different in these two respects. Unlike Edward Snowden, Drake did not have the same impact on public awareness. So he went through all this hell. It brought him to the edge of financial and personal ruin. He almost lost his house, millions of dollars in fees, almost lost his wife. They separated but later reconciled. And yet, Drake has no regrets. We'll be right back in a couple minutes.
We're standing up to the powers that tried to discredit us, silence us, smear us, raid us, and throw us in jail. They've awakened a sleeping giant. We're building a movement of transparency and accountability in both the public and private sectors because we run from nothing. We hide from nothing. And when you join and get your full access pass, you fuel a movement for truth. We are the media now.
Okay, we are back with whistleblower from the NSA, Thomas Drake. So they didn't break you.
No.
They did not break you. A lot of people watching this might be about to do what you did. They're seeing corruption, abuse, and fraud, and they're trying to figure out what to do. And they're right on that precipice of telling the truth. What advice do you have for those people?
Really think hard before you go public or even go anonymous, because it's going to change your life.
It's going to change your life.
Yes. Power does not take kindly when you hold up the mirror, especially abuse of power. They don't.
You talk about it as if it's a mirror, like they need to destroy the mirror.
Yes.
Destroy the mirror.
Or in this case, let's shoot the messenger. If you're a whistleblower, because you have a message, your message is in fact holding up the mirror. So shoot the messenger.
You call it...
it's pathological.
But it's human nature.
Yes, fundamentally. Oh yeah, and all of this, it's human nature. It's the base human condition.
The base
human condition.
Is that your terminology?
Yes.
What does that mean?
Well, the human condition over the millennia we have all the evidence. Empires come and go, people engage in corruption and evil and all kinds of sinful acts. And sometimes they get away with it, other times they don't. But I'll just say it, man's inhumanity against man runs deep, and it's important. What is the source of that? Well, you can say it's wickedness. The heart's desperately deceitful, and this is sort of our inherent nature. We are not inherently good. We can aspire, but we're not inherently good.
But it's almost like what's the darkest thing to. You can hear that you say these words, but when you actually live through what you've lived through, and I certainly, I have not been through what you have been through. I have been through some things that help me understand how you feel. The darkest things about human nature, it seems to me, is that it's emblematic of us all. It's symbolic of every man, woman, and child. It's not just the evil guys at the top.
Without exception.
That's the part that I think it's hard for people to process. That's the darkest part for me. It's like, you're not just talking about some like Dick Cheney or some guy who's on the 5th floor of the CIA. You're talking about everybody.
Look, evil, or let's say those who wake up every morning to commit all kinds of acts that do not provide for our well-being or promote our well-being. They're looking for ways to get one over, to control. There's really more controlling others. That kind of power is extraordinarily seductive. Henry Kissinger actually had something to say about that.
Yeah, the power is the ultimate aphrodisiac.
That's right. So power, you combine power, combine it with money, combine it with greed. That triangulation leads to all kinds of things.
And power and sex are kind of go hand in hand, and money gets you the power. But I think
that's for some, it's like exercising power. Even sex can simply be another instrument by which you exercise power and control over others.
It does seem like, I'm an outsider. I don't really work in politics. People have the false impression that I'm a politico. I'm not. And the thing that makes it so strange in politics is it's all about information is power. And
coin of the realm is a phrase that
what is it?
Coin of the realm. Knowledge is the coin of the realm, especially when you have knowledge over others.
Right.
Or to compromise others.
Right.
Think about the Epstein scandal.
And I don't think of what we do here in terms of that, but other people do. They view it through the lens of there's this dark world of blackmail and leverage. And as a journalist, and what you did, and at least the Baltimore Sun reporter was endeavoring to do, is journalism, is getting it out to the masses, the First Amendment. But that's not how political people tend to operate. They tend to view it as a type of leverage that they could use. And your intent here...
Very transactional.
Transactionalism.
Yeah, moral and ethics are all relative here.
Yeah, you mentioned something earlier on. You said right and wrong. Jeffrey Wigand, the famous 60 Minutes, because you went on 60 Minutes, but the tobacco guy from 1996, he said, when asked by Mike Wallace, why did you do this? And he said, because it was right. Where does your sense of right and wrong come from?
It goes all the way back to my experiences, very negative experiences, in terms of what is just, what is right when it comes to who we are and how do we behave with each other.
That you formed your sense of right and wrong from the bad things that happened to you?
Yes.
And
those experiences clearly put me in a set of circumstances where I was on this quest to figure out why all this is taking place. I used to argue with God when I was younger. Like, why do you let all this happen? Why do you let all this evil occur? Why do you let all this...
And when you had the argument with God, what did you learn?
I had to come to accept that there was a reason for it all.
That's kind of the way...
How else do you know the difference? Sort of like you can imagine in the Garden of Eden, to bring that up. How would you know the difference between good and evil if you didn't have an experience of it? How would you even appreciate what good is if you didn't know what evil is?
Well, that's true. There is a lot of
and
good.
And the difference between them. But see, that by their fruits you shall know them, to use another biblical phrase. So how do you know where are they coming from? Not by what they say per se, but by what they do.
By your
how
fruits.
They act.
By the fruits you should know them.
Yeah, well, you can plant seeds, but, by their fruits you shall know them. That's another way of saying it.
I have this book. This is, you worked with this guy at the, what was his name, Tom Devine, the Corporate Whistleblower Survival Guide.
He was, he didn't actually represent me directly, but he was one of the senior lawyers in the Government Accountability Project. There was 2 other attorneys, they're not there anymore, who actually were representing me for whistleblower advocacy. They were actually part of reaching out for the media campaign. How do you influence the court of public opinion? And also legal counsel.
I underlined a few sentences in the book. The personal price. You may be on a lot shorter fuse at home while your family may have a difficult time understanding and sympathizing with what you're going through. It is not uncommon for marriages and other relationships to fall apart. I hear this a lot from people. I have a wife and kids. Therefore, I can't do what I'm supposed to. The world is so upside down, isn't it? People are so, I mean, I don't want to make judgments, but I'm going to make a judgment. It just stands to reason, like my buddy Rick Dante said to me over the weekend, that if you have a son, don't you want your son to look up to you? I mean, you have a son. What does he think about everything that's occurred?
He's actually quite proud of his father, just based on what I know he has shared with others.
And he's the 12-year-old who was.
He's a 12-year-old that lived through part of it.
The raid.
Yes, he was right there.
Was
he was the one.
scared?
He opened the door. He actually said, "Hey, Dad, there's someone to see you." He had the presence of mind to say that.
and your wife, you went through some troubles, and
she had no idea that I had blown the whistle on anything. She was completely ignorant of anything I had done, anything I had participated in terms of investigations, let alone going to the press.
You didn't want to.
Of course not. I had to protect her. I had to protect.
What about
everybody
the pillow
else.
Privilege? Their so-called pillow privilege.
That doesn't exist.
So they interviewed her?
They interrogated her right after.
Who's they?
It was actually NSA Security.
NSA Security interrogated your wife?
Yes, right after I was raided.
Like against her will? How does that work?
Well, remember, she has a security clearance, so that's a condition of continuing employment.
Your wife has a security clearance because she's married to you? Or
no, she has security clearance because she's a contractor that works for NSA.
Oh. How did you two meet?
On an NSA contract decades ago.
I see. So the pillow privilege doesn't apply because
it's supposed to technically, but you're talking national security.
It's like I said to you.
Once you have national security enter the picture,
yeah,
all bets are off.
It's like they're going
to leverage everybody, especially people you know. I already knew that.
In love and war, there are no rules. In war and espionage, there are no rules. Anything goes.
Well, espionage, someone argues, is the world's second oldest profession, but that's.
And in my case, with the pimp hooker thing, we combined a little bit of both, prostitution and espionage. Although journalism is not espionage. Another quote from this book: "What bothers whistleblowers," and by the way, this really affected me. What bothers whistleblowers the most is not that their boss retaliated. This is at least understandable. They're operating in their own self-interest and protecting interest. But that colleagues they thought were their friends, with whom some of the whistleblowers had spent more time than their families, refused to recognize the righteousness of what they're doing.
I spent more hours. In fact, it was kind of a joke that you would actually have your work wife or work husband. The people would get that close.
Yeah, I mean, and what did they?
Your
what did
hours
your colleagues,
and hours, right?
Were your colleagues right alongside you when you were blowing the whistle, or did they?
No,
no, they didn't want to talk.
When everything happened, they didn't want. I was persona non grata. The last thing they wanted was to see themselves in any way associated with me, and by virtue of association, they were interrogated.
These people,
and questioned.
These people in the government, like this guy Michael Hayden, who. Was he the head of the NSA when you were there?
From 1999 to 2005. I was there through 2008.
What motivates these people?
Power.
Power.
Promotion.
Promotion.
Yes. Having the ability to control others. It's classic. It's just classic. It's all classic.
And Hayden was
the vast majority of human beings, with very rare exception, when put in charge of others, tends to go downhill over time.
Yeah, I mean, if I took that approach, my entity would just collapse. But it's a different model, I suppose. If you're getting money from the government versus you have to raise millions of dollars to indemnify journalists, it's a different racket. It's a different model.
You also start thinking you're privileged because you're at a senior position.
You start worshiping yourself? Do they worship themselves?
Yes.
But Hayden is supposedly.
Well, that's the who's the fairest of them all. Remember, that's another version of the mirror. But the mirror in this case is self-reflecting. That's the narcissist principle.
So these are all. You worked at the CIA for, was it 1989?
89, short time.
For about a year, and a lot of narcissists at the CIA, I imagine.
Yes.
Yeah.
But there's a lot of narcissists in society, but they tend, seems to be a higher concentration. We're all narcissists to some degree. We all have self-interest. We do. We have our own egos.
But that's the thing that we fight against.
It's fundamental. We have our own egos.
But your fight seems to be a fight against human nature itself.
Yeah, and that's a losing proposition in some ways.
It is a losing proposition.
I'm not disagreeing with that at all.
But I see.
I'm fighting with myself as well.
A little bit of myself in you, because I learned that a few years ago. I said that this is a fight against human nature. To be a truth teller, one must contend against all these things.
Yeah.
Other people pursuing their own self-interest. Was it always this bad? You're about 25. You're old enough to be my dad. My dad's about your age. Was it always this bad? You've worked in the Air Force. You worked in the CIA in the 80s, the Cold War. Or has it gotten worse? Or are we just seeing more truths come out because of the internet?
Well, it's kind of a both and. I think it is getting worse, but there's also what I'll call the avarice of apathy.
The avarice of apathy. I've heard the term religion of apathy from the Border Patrol agent. What does avarice of apathy mean?
It's just this abject, cynicism to the point where who cares?
And that's gotten worse.
Yes.
So in the 80s, it wasn't like that?
Less so.
See, they say apathy is actually worse than fear.
Yes.
Apathy is worse than fear.
Yeah, it's actually, fear can freeze you. I'm certainly familiar with what fear is, having confronted in another such situation where someone tried to assassinate me.
Someone tried to assassinate you?
Yeah, this is a long history.
Was that when you were at the CIA?
No.
Or when you were at the...
When I was growing up, long story, this is part of my quest to figure out what the heck's going on in this world. And, there's religions out there who claim to know have the truth when they don't.
It was a cult, I think.
It was a cult. And the cult leader, who called himself a prophet, sent someone after me, literally to kill me, because I had blown the whistle because he was engaging in child predation.
Another thing about you that's interesting is that throughout your life, even in that anecdote, which we could spend an hour on, there's a common practice of you telling the truth in all forms, not just at the NSA, but back then. And
yeah, it's got me in trouble a lot.
But you don't
remember what Orwell said.
What's
truth
that?
is treason in the empire of lies.
Truth is treason in the
Truth
empire
is
of lies.
treason in the empire of lies.
Also, in times of universal deceit, telling the truth is a revolutionary act. Universal deceit.
No, Orwell is inspirational for me, but I never, 1984 was never meant to. It was never meant. It was a warning, but it's become a manual. In many
it's almost
respects.
like 1984.
You got to remember the main character in 1984.
Mm-hmm.
The only place
Winston, the protagonist.
The only place, it was actually a love story. If you actually read the book in full, it's a love story. But he couldn't even do that, right? Because he was so scared and so fearful. Remember, in the end, he cried uncle. He did. He gave in.
The torture device.
But remember, even in his apartment early on, the only place he could go to where the cameras, the eye couldn't see him, was in the corner, which meant they knew where he was. I know what that's like because I was surveilled upside down and inside out, electronically and physically, for years. It's a very weird feeling when you have eyes and ears listening in and looking at you.
Did they surveil you with secret warrants before they raided you?
I do not, to this day, I do not know. It's possible, but I don't know that.
They did that to me.
It is possible.
The 2703 warrants, they went to Microsoft, Apple, Google, and got all of my communications.
But see, I was also well aware that they had systems in place that would have done that anyways, whether they needed a warrant or not. Remember, you're in an environment where the warrant didn't really matter. That was just pro forma. Even coming to my house, yes, they had to go to an Article 3 judge, a magistrate judge, to get a
warrant.
That's correct. Based on an affidavit. The affidavit is given to, basically is pulled together information to says this is why we need a warrant from you, Article 3 judge.
Has that affidavit been released?
Yes.
Is it
but
redacted?
It wasn't released during the whole time. This is a whole another whole part of this story, which there's extraordinary threads in all of this. The government actually would not give the affidavit behind the warrant to my public defenders because they claimed it was classified or under classification review to be more
You
accurate.
had public defenders because you couldn't afford counsel.
I was declared indigent before the court.
Indigent means?
Indigent meaning when you have to fill out a form. Are you able to pay for your own representation?
And you couldn't.
I had no money left.
And where did that money go to pay lawyers prior to that
So
moment?
when I was indicted so unceremoniously in April of 2010, right? This is 2 years after I resigned, obviously under pressure. You have to fill out, before arraignment, you have to fill out a bunch of paperwork. One of them is, what is your financial wherewithal? You list all your assets, you list all your debits. I owned the house with my wife, but the house was nowhere near, even if we had sold the house. I knew this was, again, I had to have a criminal defense attorney. So for the first 2 years, I'm spending $500 an hour.
$500 an hour.
$500 an hour.
By the way, that's one of the things
and
lawyers
he cut me a break.
Lawyers make money off the corruption.
It doesn't matter which way it is. That's the great thing about being a lawyer. That's why lawyers get a bad name, because it doesn't matter to them.
Yeah, it doesn't. They have no ownership in the outcome
at all.
I don't know if saying they don't care because they're human, but the incentives are all economic for them. They do not care, and it's disgusting.
Yeah.
And I just want to make a comment, even though I'm interviewing. I'm going to make a comment. We're all going to die, and it's like the Braveheart speech, from the Mel Gibson says so in so few words. It's like, many years from now, when you're lying in your bed and you're just about to die, you're going to look back on the way you behaved. Does it really matter that you were making $500 an hour versus $50?
No. But if other things don't matter in life, then that's what matters. If you're left with just acquisition, make as much money as you can in your own self-interest, by the way, then that's the incentive.
But the more stuff you accumulate, if you have a mortgage and $1 million house in Bethesda and an Audi and a nagging wife who wants her handbag, then maybe you need the $500 an hour. But all that stuff goes away.
None of it matters in the end.
But people don't know that. They don't know that deeply.
But that's partly, I think, why there's a huge hole in most human hearts, because that's what's missing.
But it's not missing in your heart. That's my interpretation.
Remember, I'm still a human being.
But you're still a sinner.
I'm not sinless.
We're all sinners.
That's right.
I mean, Charlie Kirk, the least hypocritical man I've ever known, I'm sure he was still a sinner. I'm a sinner.
We all come short.
We all come short. But
that's why, and we can't outlive death. Short of
I don't know if people. I say this, by the way, Thomas, at events, and people just look at me like I'm an alien. They don't like me saying that. They think it's weird. What people do to me every day, even on the street, is they project their fear onto me. So they'll say, "Aren't you afraid? Aren't you scared? You shouldn't go on your sailboat. You might die." And there's probably a proper way to respond to that. But what I say is, we're all going to die one day. But not all of us live well. And in the final analysis, I feel like seconds before you die, but you actually sort of did die, and you look back.
I didn't want to wait until I was on my deathbed to sort of come to grips with like everything I had ever done and try to make amends with my Creator.
Yeah,
I'd rather do that sooner, not later, when it actually meant something.
I mean, I have 100 people messaging me on Signal right now from within various, just on this subcontract fraud. And I have a dream. Like, imagine if all of those people at the same exact time all told the truth.
See, this is what's interesting. You just touched on something very interesting when it comes to whistleblowing. Unlike the government, unlike the umpteen lawyers that they, essentially unlimited funds like the DOJ had. Remember, in my investigation, it was 5 full-time prosecutors. When the New York Times article was published and they launched that investigation, 2 weeks later, 5 full-time prosecutors, 25 full-time FBI agents were assigned to the case, including agents from what was called the Mole Hunter Unit. The Mole Hunter Unit is a specialized unit, highly trained to go after real spies.
It's actually called Mole Hunter Unit?
I used to walk by the desk at the FBI field office.
I think this is what scares them, though, when we say that we have all these people. I think that that really scares the shit out of them, and they want to know who I'm talking to. And when the FBI raided me They took my phone. I logged into my phone to call my lawyer, and they snatched my phone, and now they had access to all of the people on Signal that were messaging me, which is, if you think about it.
Yeah, in my case, because I had the original iPhone.
Oh, yeah?
2007. It had just been released. They could not break it at Quantico. That was the facility.
Is that right?
Yeah, they could at that time. They couldn't break it. They literally came back to me and said, "We need your password." I said, "Why?" "Because we can't get into your phone."
Did you give it to them?
Yeah, I did.
Because you just didn't want to be...
At that point, it didn't matter.
So now they had access to everything in your life that's on your phone. Although back then...
Take an electron microscope, and I'll even invite the audience right now.
Yeah.
The audience live on this show. An electron microscope. But this electron microscope pours into every aspect of your life from day one. What would they find out? I don't care. Everything public, everything private, everything in between. Everything intimate, social connections, medical, you name it. All your passwords, all your accounts, everything you've ever said. Especially those things you've said, we didn't want anyone else to hear them.
What's your point? Do you
What
want the
would they
audience to
find
know?
out? What would they get to know about you?
And I hear you.
The reason because I was specially trained in the Air Force. What would you, if you found yourself in denied territory? If I found myself in East Germany during the Cold War, if I found myself in the Soviet Union because of where we used to fly in the RC-135 reconnaissance aircraft, how would you deal with being tortured psychologically in particular? You know what they were given special permission? We had to sign a waiver. It basically waived your Fourth Amendment rights. You consent to the government literally being able to use everything there was available to them against you. And they would bring that up in these special training sessions, classified.
And as the audience listens to you say this, because they didn't go through that special training, and they do the exercise in question, which is to look at all the skeletons. And by the way, we all have something in our life, even if it's not illegal, although technically you break 3 felonies a day. But even if it's not illegal, perhaps it's slightly embarrassing.
Well, remember what
intimate.
Stalin said.
What's that?
Find the man,
show me the crime.
That's right.
But when the audience engages in the exercise, you just ask them
Yes.
to engage in. What is the point of the exercise? What are you suggesting by having people do that exercise?
If the government wants to own you, they can go a long ways to do that. I was confronted with all kinds of information.
But from your life,
Yes, even stuff that was made up.
they just make it up.
Allegations, yes.
But are you doing this exercise to scare people, or to
No.
just tell them the way it is?
the way
or-
it is.
Okay.
But that's seductive power. The power to actually, that's why the Fourth Amendment is so critical to what it means to be an American.
I
Is
see.
one of the distinctions that makes us American.
That's what
That a
makes us so
man's home
special.
is his castle. That a man's person is right? It is our super high bar to break it.
And in this room, there's a man over here who stands for the Fourth Amendment, and a man over here that stands for the First Amendment.
Yes.
And the FBI raided us both. They raped us
Yes,
by taking our property
yes.
and going in there,
It's an utter violation of who you are.
which leads to another question that there's an American flag over there. I don't know if you can switch the camera angle. We're live. That flag is right behind Thomas Drake. And as a child, when you were in elementary school, did you pledge allegiance to the
Yes.
flag? I did too.
Every morning.
When the FBI raided me, and I don't know if I've ever said this publicly, and I'll probably get heat for it, but I had fear overcome me. I mean, I can't even describe. It's probably fear that many of you feel out there on something in your life. But I never felt so much fear. And the reason why I felt fear is because I thought, holy shit, if they can raid a newsroom, which never happened before in American history, what else are they willing to do? And then my mind went to places that I didn't want to go. For example, I thought, are they putting child porn on my phone? This is everything that the audience is always projecting onto me, by the way. This is the way most people think. It's a very powerful deterrent because it makes the sheep go to the slaughter. They'll do whatever their powers be want them to do. But for those 3 days after the raid, I felt the way they did. I was scared.
Yeah, but instead of a shepherd, there's a wolf.
What do you mean?
You said the sheep going to slaughter.
So the sheep, or the
There's
people.
no shepherd to protect the sheep. It's a wolf
It's
in
a
sheep's
wolf.
clothing. Or it's just the wolf.
A wolf in sheep's clothing.
Doesn't matter.
I was thinking back as a child to the Pledge of Allegiance to the flag, and you've articulated it in a way that I never have, which is the Fourth Amendment is so, and the Fourth Amendment in particular, what makes us uniquely American. I almost it shattered my illusion about my own country, and it's hard for us to reconcile love of country and the kind of optimism. And I deeply admired Charlie Kirk because he was so optimistic, while simultaneously acknowledging the brutal, ugly, dark reality.
I've had to live with both.
How do
the
you...
aspirational nature of who we became as a country.
Yeah.
Separating ourselves from a monarchy.
Yeah, because in our case, it is a monarchy.
Yes.
Aristotle says you are what you repeatedly do.
Yeah.
Regardless of what you aspire to be.
Yeah.
When violent thugs with guns harass your family and take your intimate stuff.
Yeah.
That's monarchy behavior.
Yes, it is. There's a piece of paper that lets them do that.
Yeah.
Signed by a judge.
A warrant.
What's the difference?
And I showed you my affidavit. Every word's redacted.
Yeah.
Did they redact every word of your affidavit after they released it?
No.
I'd like to see that affidavit. I didn't have that in front of me, but what do you make of that out there? That every single word is redacted.
Yeah, that's quite extraordinary. I've seen a lot of things redacted, and I've seen some things that are pretty much all redacted, but they really didn't want you to know.
Do you think there was moles and informants?
Yes. It's hard to see. It's
an opinion.
They don't want to reveal to you how they found out, or even who their what they call sources and methods. If there's one thing the government gets really particular about, it's sources and methods.
And everyone says, call Cash, call Pam, you know Pam Bondi, call Pam. This is the problem with politics, is that people give me the advice of asking a favor of the president or the attorney general or, Kash Patel. By the way, I think Kash Patel's a good guy. I think Pam means well. But I always say if the administration of justice depends upon the citizen calling in a personal favor from the person at the top of the apparatus.
Not justice.
First of all, that's not justice. Second of all, those individuals have to protect their sources and methods.
Yes.
So if Kash Patel does not protect his sources and methods, throw this on the screen, team. Go ahead, throw that on the screen. There we go, look at that. Every word redacted. So if I'm Kash Patel, even if I did have the authority, I think he has to go to Pam Bondi, then they're violating their maxim of protecting their sources and methods. They can't release that, can they?
No.
They can't. So they have to blow the whistle on their own agency.
But it gives them an advantage over you.
What do you mean?
Because they never have to share with you what they knew or didn't know. But that's why I fear for the future of America. I really do.
You fear?
Remember, all empires end up in the dustbins of history. There's no empire from the time we came into existence, from Adam and Eve, has ever survived.
Unless, Thomas, what if more people do what you do? Like if there were 100 of you, or
so that's my hope, that there's still enough people left that care enough to stand up and make a difference.
Well, I guarantee you there are. They're messaging me on Signal right now.
But remember, see, some people still to this day say, Tom, you're so naive. You really believe in the aspirational nature of America as a country? Yeah, well, in the preamble of the Constitution, guess what it says? We the people.
Yeah. Yeah.
What? To form a more it never meant it was going to be perfect, but form a more perfect union. Isn't that something? Isn't that good? Good.
Yeah,
isn't that something that is worthy of aspiring to? Doesn't it have value in itself? Why the division? Why but see, now I'm back to human nature again.
Yeah.
And I've had to accept for quite a while the abysmal state of human nature in all of us.
You're between a rock and a hard place, because you have to love the country and you have to take an oath to protect the country, but it makes you almost... I've had some people say it makes them ashamed to be an American, which is a horrible thing to say, but it's an emotion that people feel. When they're wrestled with... Put this back on the screen again. I'll bring this up every single guest. Look at this. Look at this crap.
Yeah.
This is outrageous.
I've wrestled with the reality that I was betrayed by my own country.
Well,
You have to remember,
we both have.
After Snowden, they formed a joint task force, insider threat task force between the DNI and the DOJ. They had a rogues gallery of those who would do us harm. It had all the classic spies from U.S. history. It also had a picture of me and a picture of Snowden. Now, all the spies had flags of the countries to which they had sold or given secrets. In fact, they had betrayed our country, America, United States of America.
Yeah.
Guess what flag was flying underneath Snowden and me?
What's that?
No flag. We were considered to have no country.
Professor Alfred describes you guys, the whistleblowers, as it was Daniel Ellsberg, the space-walking astronauts whose umbilical cord has been disconnected from the mothership. You are out there on your own.
Yeah, well, I effectively became a political prisoner in my own country.
And
remember, I never left the U.S. I stood and faced the music, to say it that way. I wasn't going to hide out. I wasn't going to go somewhere else. I wasn't going to go run away. I decided to stand my ground as an American.
And you're still alive.
Who took an oath 5 times to support and defend a friggin' piece of paper.
Has anyone ever been accused you of being controlled op, or like you're something?
Yes.
Yeah.
Limited op.
They're doing that in the comments
Limited
right now
hangout.
because I said that Pam means well. If you people are, you're out of
No,
your,
I've had people that still think that
ridiculous.
I'm a front. There's people that want to believe
Some
that.
people say I don't know what
Well,
you have
it's
to.
well,
Nothing,
it's easier-
nothing screams you're a front like being raided by the FBI and fired from the company you founded and sued 50 times. Nothing screams that. You people haven't done a damn thing. This guy suffered. And you don't understand how hard it is to try to get the reform. You have suffered. You've given up a lot, but you're still alive. And one of the things people say is it's a kind of a tautology, or perhaps a better word is paradox, which is they haven't killed you yet, so you must be controlled op. Do you get that?
Yes. Oh no, I've had people who've claimed that, like, as fact. I have to be a controlled op.
Because you're still alive.
Because they don't. Yes. And I didn't end up in prison. There's always some reason why I'm a controlled op, because I didn't actually end up in prison.
Do you think that's because that's that mirror thing?
Yes.
They're not doing the thing, so in order to make themselves feel comfortable, like I'm not getting my ass off the couch like Ed Snowden did or Thomas Drake did. I don't want to think about dying for many reasons, one of which is I'm not a real Christian. So is that what that is? Kind of I need to destroy the reflection in the mirror?
That's part of it.
Whether it's John Q. Citizen in the comments, or it's Michael Hayden.
Yeah, or you throw Vanta Black at the mirror. Vanta Black, super black.
Say that again.
Vanta Black.
Vanta Black. What do you mean?
Vanta Black is a black that when you paint the object with Vanta Black, it basically hides the very object that it's painted on.
Yeah.
It's that black. So if you throw Vanta Black at a mirror, guess what? The mirror disappears.
And I asked you this question last night, and you said something very profound. Is it that do they hate you, or do they have the capacity? Because people are very phony, as you know. There's this performative democracy. There's narcissism. There's phonyism. Do these people really give a damn about you, or are they so in their own narcissistic shell that, like, what do they really think when they brush their teeth at night?
If I go to the darkest side of the human nature, then it's a projection.
What do you mean?
It's basically a dark projection of their own ego. So they have to label it, they have to box it. Because if you actually were to confront it directly within yourself, it becomes extremely uncomfortable. You would have to face the realities of your
your own
yes.
nature.
And why would you? The ego protects itself against that, typically.
The ego
it doesn't want to go there. The ego puts all these layers of armor up to protect itself, because the ego is extraordinarily vulnerable. And of course, if you're in positions of power, you've got mechanisms by which you can protect yourself.
Yeah, 99.9% of the people I bust, there was one guy, a 24-year-old kid, who started crying and saying, I'm sorry, I shouldn't have done it. But 99.99% of the people I bust do not atone for their sins. They do not say, I really made a mistake. There's a bad part of my heart. I did something wrong. People just don't do that. The ego, as you say, takes over, and they must protect themselves and provide a shield and armament.
That's why even as a human being, while I'm still here, every day I wake up and I surrender myself even more.
To God.
Yes.
To Jesus
my
Christ.
Creator, my Lord and Savior.
And has this experience brought you closer to God?
Yes. Far more than I can even begin to describe in words. It's a living reality at an extraordinary level.
I mean, my advice is that I think you should, if you haven't written the book or finished writing the book, you should do that. You should write down your story as soon as you can, because I think just getting all this on paper and trying to put it in words would be a good thing for humanity and for yourself.
I am in the process of writing a book about all of this, and it does have to go through NSA pre-publication review, and that is its own process.
And the guy that got in trouble for that, Mike, the mustache guy, Bolton, is your opinion that he was a little sloppy?
I'm not sure, because I don't trust anything the government alleges, given my own experience and others. It's very easy to frame you because they have the high ground.
People,
it's possible, but
you talk
and
about,
a lot of people don't like him.
You talk about distrust of
I don't trust. So this is a fundamental. Who do you trust?
And where does your loyalty lie?
Yes.
Most people's loyalty, I have found, this is my experience, and this is certainly true of politics, they have silver bulletitis. If I elect Trump, they'll solve the problems. Let me give you a more specific, less abstract example. Well-meaning people here in the Palm Beaches. I had lunch with an individual the other day, and they said, I don't understand. Donald Trump is the president. Can't he help you? And those same people will say, but they'll even say, and I'm kind of addressing the audience here because they're listening. They'll even say, why are you going after Trump by exposing Epstein stuff? Why are you going? So people, it's very Manichaean. They view the lens in terms of party and loyalty to politicians. And is that because the human mind, its simplest explanation is, let me elect this guy and he'll solve my problems?
One of the dangers with the human condition is it's easy to have if a strong man comes along, and history is replete with this. There was all kinds of books written about the good German during the Nazi era. Why would so many good Germans go along with it? Now, of course, a lot of people left.
Is that Ordinary Man by Browning, or recall the name?
Ordinary, yes, but the good German.
Right.
Look, you had food, you were secure in your house, you had money, right? So yeah, he wanted to go off and start fighting wars. He was a megalomaniac of enormous proportions, but he isn't the only one in history. And umpteen millions of people died. Why, right?
Banality of Evil, Hannah Arendt, what was the name of that?
Hannah Arendt.
And who is that?
She's a famous German political philosopher.
The banality of evil is within us all.
Yes. It was a phrase she wrote it because she was dealing with, remember, there was a couple of different trials with those who came out of the Nazi era. And this was an article she published in the 60s. One of the senior leaders was actually put on trial, and he had no remorse for what he did. So she referred to it as banality of evil. My interpretation of that, and she wrote The Origins of Totalitarianism, a extraordinary book in terms of getting behind why is there totalitarianism? Why is there this tendency, even in democratic societies, to drift into autocracies or some version of autocracy? Democracy is actually, it's very fragile, really is. Even our unique form of democracy, which is a constitutional republic, Look what happened to the Roman. Remember, part of it's were modeled after the Roman Empire, in part in English common law. It's just the way things drift. But the banality of evil, people don't show up, in a red jumpsuit and horns.
Yeah.
It's in measured tones. It's through statistics and numbers, and a lot of performative.
Performative democracy.
Yes.
It's a phrase I've never heard before.
But for me, democracy has now become democracy, but ISY, not ACY. It's the hypocrisy of democracy.
Do you find yourself alienated from other people?
Yes.
Describe that.
There was a period when I was facing some pretty severe consequences, potentially the rest of my life in prison.
Mm-hmm.
I know exactly what it means to experience the 1,000-yard stare. There was a phrase that was actually attributed to World War I veterans coming back from the front lines in Europe.
You with the 1,000-yard or others towards you?
No, the 1,000-yard stare. Total isolation. Everybody you know.
Did you have one
gone.
friend outside?
Yeah, a couple.
You did have a couple friends.
Oh yeah, there was people
childhood
that
friends or?
knew me before everything happened,
yeah.
including my best friend in the military.
And you still have them as a friend?
Yes.
Well, that's good. At least you have
Well,
that.
one of them actually created the Save Tom Drake Facebook page. I didn't know it at the time, but he decided to put with his family, decided to put together a Facebook page just to keep up with what was happening to me. This was right after I was indicted.
I have a complicated question that I never figured out the answer to, and it might be hard for me to articulate this question. And if you're just tuning in live, this will go on Spotify, YouTube, everywhere podcasts go. You're listening to Thomas Drake, legendary 21st century whistleblower who inspired Ed Snowden. Thomas Drake blew the whistle on the NSA. Thomas Drake worked for the Air Force. He was a crypto-linguist. He intercepted signals. He worked for the CIA in 1989, then went on to work on the NSA before blowing the whistle in the early 2000s, and he joins me here today. Complicated question. You know the phrase, a friend will help you bury the body, that old phrase about loyalty? And I think there's virtue in loyalty. I do. You need loyalty. Discretion is the better part of valor. We're all sinners. We need friends. Friendship is a good thing in life. Loyalty is a good thing in life.
We're not islands.
Correct. No man is an island.
No.
But yet you also need to be truthful. And I was always trying to figure out, how do you reconcile? Because there's a danger here. You create a society of rats and tattletales. I'm sure. I know.
Oh, I've been accused of that.
They accused you of that.
Oh,
I don't view you that way.
Yeah.
But there's an element of that concern for people. They don't want to be a tattletale. And there's like these two competing virtues, which is friendship and loyalty. I'm talking about, you all know what I'm talking about. Your best friend helps you bury the body in the desert versus, that's a murder. I got to blow the whistle on my friend. How do you reconcile those two competing virtues? Real question.
Well, then it's not a real friend if you're actually burying the body.
Yeah.
See,
Fair
the
enough.
true friends that were left, not the new ones I made. I've made a whole set of new acquaintances, friends, someone quite close to, as a result of what happened to me. And what I now call it, I'm an asterisk American.
Asterisk.
I'm not, because the government decided I was a Benedict Arnold, so I'm not a real American. I'm not a true American because I betrayed my country. So I'm an asterisk American. I'm still an American. I'm still a citizen. But I'm not a real American. A real American wouldn't have, quote unquote, in their eyes, wouldn't have done what I did. But the true friends, they looked right into the mirror. They never blinked.
They looked into the mirror.
Yes.
To look at themselves.
Yes.
Wow. Those are who your real friends are.
Yes.
That's actually very profound. They
Yes.
did not throw the black stuff at the mirror.
The Vanta Black.
The Vanta Black.
That's right.
Oh, I say that they smash the mirror. They have to smash the mirror.
Well, some don't even want to do that because, see, that would be, oh my gosh, because they have to make it the appearance.
In front of the mirror.
Right. You make it fully opaque.
I see. Okay.
But that's your own ego. Basically, you're basically, think of the pain as your ego. You're throwing your dark ego, that side of your ego, onto the mirror.
That
But
is
ultimately, the mirror is
interesting.
yourself.
That is interesting. Your friends, I'm just learning something as I sit here. I never thought about it that way. Your friends are the ones who are able to introspect and atone for their own
Yes.
inadequacies? Or
Yes.
Okay.
At a deeply human level. But I can count them on one hand.
That
Not
you've
two.
met?
One hand.
You can count those people on one hand?
No, this is before. The ones that remain, the ones that were not fair weather, the ones that's, as much as they were concerned about my well-being and what would happen and everything else, they never lost faith in who I was because they knew me as who I was before everything happened. They knew the real me. They knew my faith even before it all happened.
And I hope you don't mind me asking a personal question, but I'm curious. If you don't answer, that's fine. But how about your wife? Did she know?
We reconciled.
Reconciliation. That's got to be hard going through that. You got to find a partner who's basically willing to go to jail with you.
Yes.
Even though you didn't break the law. They accused you of breaking the law.
Oh, no. Even the public defenders, there was a meeting right before, as everything was still pre-trial. So we're now entering, was the 13th month from the time that I was actually indicted. So now we're talking the May of 2011.
Mm-hmm.
They came to the house and put huge pressure while my wife is there, because we're reconciled. You've got to plead out, Tom, for the sake of your family.
For the sake of your family, just like with Michael Flynn, they go after the family. And if they can't go after the family, they'll make something up.
I was willing, and she had accepted, to her credit, that I could end up in prison.
What do you mean she accepted
She
it?
accepted that it could happen.
She was at peace with that?
Yes. As difficult as that would be.
Well, that's a very special woman, I would say.
Yes.
Very special woman.
Because I'm well aware that whistleblowers go through double hell when it comes to what happens to many of them and their closest relationships.
What was the most horrible thing or moment, the worst moment or worst part of this hell for you that you overcame? You did overcome it. If you think back over the last 20 years, was there a moment in space and time where like, this is like almost your breaking point?
It's when I was separated from my wife.
Yeah.
It was the depths of despair. I was not living, because I was kicked out. I'll just be very direct. I was kicked out of the house.
Yeah. It's never the enemy. It's always the person that's with you that quits or leaves.
That hurt. It hurt because I couldn't, because obviously I had betrayed her. See, I mean, you're now back to the fundamentals here. I betrayed her.
There's almost listening to you talk,
Sure.
There's almost a paradox of the human condition. I don't know what to call it, but
That's why I cry, and this is why I say I'll cry. I cry for humanity. I've said this, and I'll say it to you in a different way on your show live here. I don't want anybody else, or even the rest of the world, to go through what I did. I don't. Remember, I'm not the only one that's gone through these kinds of trials and tribulations. Now, it's true that after having gone through all these, and my cancer more recently, which put me right on the edge again, the only thing left in life is life itself. And that's why, for me, the only thing that remains is a truth, a way, and the life. But that's encapsulated in my faith. That there is only one path in the end, and that's the path I choose. I choose no other path. I cannot choose the path of man because I know where that dead ends. So, but I don't want, because I'm afraid, I think things are going to get worse. I really do. I think that the world is struggling. I think the world is in tribulation. It's groaning. And we're coming to the end of the age of man at some point here in the future.
when do you think that's going to happen?
I don't. This is, even Jesus Christ said that no one knows the day or the hour except the Father.
In the next 100 years, next our lifetimes, who knows?
If you count from the date time that Adam and Eve were created, some would say the age of man is 6,000 years. So we're certainly approaching that point.
Stuff gets real spiritual real fast, doesn't it?
Incredibly spiritual.
Like almost instantaneously.
Yes, it does. But I'm increasingly living in both worlds at the same time now. I'm physically here. I manifest as a flesh and blood human being, but there's a whole new being that is now being created inside of me. And there's a whole nother life that awaits.
Are you political? Are you independent? What's your politics?
For the longest time, and this is interesting in terms of history, I was a registered Republican. Didn't always vote Republican or Democrat. I tended to vote independent. Mm-hmm. I'm a registered independent in the state of Maryland. I'm affiliated with no party.
We only have a couple minutes left, and I could talk to you for many more hours about all the things that the facts of your life, but I was more interested in talking to you about, I think, the spiritual aspects.
It's only been recently that I've actually started sharing that, but I think that's part.
I mean, the audience is loving it. Yeah. They really admire you, and
look, I have nowhere else to go. Remember, there's nothing else left. When all else is taken away, there's only one place I could go to. That place was always secure. That was always a secure part of my life. It was never in doubt. No matter how dark, that even in the darkest days and mornings, and remember, I would have, you call the night sweats.
Me too.
Waking up in the middle of the night.
Yep.
I found myself, I had PTSD. The pressures were so enormous. There was at one point I actually started, I haven't said this in a long time. I had, it's a special medical condition where you're under such extraordinary stress that you actually start forming in your sweat, blood starts coming out. Which probably led in part to my body breaking down after everything happened. And I ended up with cancer for...
It didn't help.
It did not help.
It did not help.
No.
Stress can
And then I was sitting there
exacerbate.
wondering, is this my time? I've been through so many near-death experiences or been confronted by death and evil that I now have lymphoma. And it was stage 4. It invaded my bone marrow. It invaded my kidneys.
But you overcame that too.
I overcame that too. And so if anything, I would hope, but it's not me. It's important for me to share with you, James. None of this is me. I attribute all of it to my Creator. None of it is me. This is not me.
It sounds like a miracle.
But if it serves as inspiration, if it serves as hope for others.
It's a mixed message to this audience because I don't think they want to endure the pain that you've endured, and yet you overcame it and you're still here today. You know, someone said to me recently, I was complaining to someone about how little time I had, and they said, you know, James, you have all the time in the world. You're going to live another 40 years, 50 years. You know who doesn't have any more time? Charlie Kirk. We're still here. You're still alive.
Yeah.
They did not break you.
They did not.
They did not break you.
In the end, I was vindicated. That's true. It is. It was considered a victory against the government, one of the rare ones.
If you're just tuning in, we're talking to Thomas Drake. We're about to wrap. Thomas Drake, you know who Edward Snowden is. If there hadn't been a Thomas Drake, there wouldn't be an Edward Snowden. Thomas Drake blew the whistle on the National Security Agency. You think it takes balls to blow the whistle on your municipal government or the 8A fraudsters at your fraudulent subcontractors? This guy blew the whistle on Fort Meade, Maryland. You're on the show called The Price is My Life. And one of the last questions I want to ask you is, you know, this is a very direct statement. My price is my life. Has anyone tried to bribe you? Like, people are trying to hurt you, but has anyone tried to offer you things
Yes.
to not tell the truth? Talk about that.
When I was still at NSA, there was all kinds of pressure to leave NSA and go back to being a contractor. Remember, I took a pretty good hit on my income when I joined NSA as a senior executive. I was doing really well. I was a principal in a boutique.com at the time. I was doing all kinds of traveling. I was doing consulting in Silicon Valley. It was, you know, it was the go-go days in terms of that space. And in fact, people questioned my sanity coming to serving my country again, feeling that call to serve my country again at a very secret agency. But in a different job, a job I left because I was forced out of the first one. Right, I was too much to handle, I guess, for them. So I ended up in a more technical job. I was actually a technical director for software engineering implementation enterprise-wide. So I was going back to my roots in terms of industry. One day, this person shows up through the executive assistant, scheduled a meeting with me, and I had a small office and a little conference table. And this was like what was the main building at NSA, a couple floors below the director's suite. He proceeds to tell me, you know, with all your background and all your contacts and industry and everything else, how would you like to quadruple your salary? And that's just base. I was being enticed on money alone, because money does talk.
Money talks.
I was being enticed to return to industry, and instead of making 140, 50,000 at that point, I can now make 600,000 minimum before bonuses. And I said, you know, you're actually in violation. And I started listing off what he was in violation of. And he backed right out of my office. I never saw him again.
You didn't even think about taking the money?
Nope, I did not, because there's way more to life than money.
From your words to everyone else's ears. Well, is there anything else I didn't touch that you want to address for our audience?
Because of the oath I took to support and defend the Constitution 5 times in my government service to this country, the country I still love, that flag, I can't begin to tell you what it means to me. Okay, I can get emotional about it because it really still means something to me. Mm-hmm. It's a symbol, but it is our flag. Mm-hmm. But I made a commitment when all of this happened, after all this happened, no matter what else happened, that I would dedicate the rest of my life to defending life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Mm-hmm. Those extraordinary words in the Declaration of Independence, the very foundational basis for why we had the American Revolution. And those are inalienable rights. They're amongst a number of them, but those are at the heart of the American experience.
Well, I admire you, and I'm happy to know you. And one of the blessings of both of our lives is that we met each other.
Yes.
You know,
sure
this crazy,
and
crazy
all the
path.
topsy-turvy world.
Topsy-turvy journey of 20 years to
yes.
Here you are in the studio in Florida, and that's
and
perhaps
you are a
one of
real
the
human
blessings.
being. You just don't wear costumes on occasion.
Yeah. Yes, there is a human, a $10 wig, right? That's all it takes. Yeah, that's another thing. On a funny note, that people are very inspired. I'm looking at the comments, and people are genuinely inspired. It's a breath of fresh air, I think, for people to hear this. But I am a human being, and so are you. And I think it's hard because it's hard to go through that pain, but it makes you, it's so cliche, but it makes you stronger, even through my I don't want to make this about me, but I have not been through what you've been through, but betrayal was the hardest thing I've ever been through.
Yeah. Well, it reminds me of Daniel. Remember, he went into the lion's den. That's, it's the story that's told in the Old Testament, in the book of Daniel. And people thought, oh my gosh, what's going to happen to you? Right? You're going into the lion's den. That phrase has been passed on over the centuries plus, millennia since. Going into the lion's den, I realized, and that lion was roaring. That lion really wanted to take me out.
The NSA is the ultimate lion's den. But
what the irony is in all this? There are very good people who continue to work. Silent sentinels doing their job day in and day out on behalf of America. Not everybody's corrupt.
In the intelligence community.
That's correct.
Not
everybody's corrupt.
I went to Langley and did the story on the one CIA guy who was bragging in the bar about withholding information, and they fired him. When I went to Langley and I was doing my stand-up, people were driving out of Langley at 6 o'clock after work, opening their windows, say, "Keep it up, James O'Keefe." So I think you're right. I think, whatever. There's a lot of people there that are decent people.
Yes.
But it
But
goes,
they're not going to stand out. They're not going to take any risks.
well, then we go full circle. And
Yep.
are you decent if you don't stand up? But they're decent people. They're salt of the earth people. They agree with you, and you're giving them a voice. And I will say one thing at the end of this show, which is that to be a leader, you have to acknowledge the ugliness of reality while also being auspicious, while also casting a vision and saying, here's what we need to do. And there will be whistleblowers that come forward. I can tell you that right now because I'm talking to them. And they may be learning something from this conversation. And the world has changed, I think, better than it was in 2005, 2006, 2007. There's the internet now. There's more voices now. They will come forward. I will make sure of it. And in order for them to be effective, they're going to have to go through me. So thank you, Thomas Drake, for being here.
You know what that means?
Yeah.
You are not only living, but you're exercising the First Amendment, the cornerstone of the entire Bill of Rights.
And if they win, if the powers that be defeat that would be it's such an existential
Remember
problem.
What Franklin said in response to a woman reporter who actually came up to him after that secret conclave, the Constitutional Convention. What did you guys do in there? What did you create? A republic if you can keep it. He knew there were no guarantees if you can keep it.
Have you ever heard the Horatius poem? The Horatius poem? What is it? Thus outspoke brave Horatius. This is also about the Roman Empire. Thus outspoke brave Horatius, the guardian of the gate. To every man upon this earth death cometh soon or late.
Yeah.
But how can men die better than facing fearful odds for the ashes of his fathers and the temples of his gods? We're all going to die. The question is not whether you die, it's how you live.
Yeah.
So the Accenture whistleblowers, I'm talking to you. Stay tuned. We're coming after you. We're going to expose you. Thank you, Thomas.
Thank you, James, for having me here.
Every story we tell here at O'Keefe Media Group, breaking the news, going places others won't, taking risks others won't, is powered by your support and by our partners at American Independence Gold.
The dynamic, the shift from then to today. 1971 is when Richard Nixon took us off of the gold standard. That came as a result of the United States printing dollars to fund the Vietnam War. The president of France was the first one to become aware of the fact that the United States has more dollars in circulation than they have gold to back those dollars. There became a run on the bank for gold in the United States, right? And this was a public announcement he had made to the world, and countries from all around the world were repatriating their gold home. And it came to the point where, had this trend continued, the United States would have been drained of all of its gold holdings, hence why Nixon decoupled the dollar from gold on August the 15th, 1971. At that point, the dollar actually lost about 70% of its value. The dollar plummeted. Very similar to where we are today. Why did the dollar plummet? Well, we've all heard that the United States dollar is backed by the full faith and credit of the United States government. Well, back then, that full faith and credit of the United States government took a beating. Then versus today, we're in a very similar position, right? So the dollar was saved in 1974 because Henry Kissinger made a deal with the Saudi royal family and said, we will provide your oil fields with our military protection if you will only sell oil in US dollars. Most of us have heard the term the petrodollar. Well, that's where that term arose from. In essence, the dollar became backed by the oil trade. During this time, gold, prior to 71, was a tier 1 asset, which again, as stated, definition by the central bank, meaning it's the safest, most liquid thing you can own in your portfolio. A tier 1 asset gives a bank the ability to borrow up to 100% of the value of that collateral. When Nixon took us off the gold standard, the US Treasury replaced gold as that tier 1 asset. gold became what's called a tier 3 asset, also known as a commodity. For many of your listeners' lives, they've heard gold labeled as a commodity. And because gold was labeled as a commodity, it was assumed to have commodity risk like oil or like corn or wheat, so on. However, that agreement that Kissinger made with the Saudis was a 50-year agreement, and it ended in July of last year. Just before the ending of that agreement, the Bank of International Settlements, which is the central bank to all the central banks, in March of 2019, reclassified gold as a tier 1 asset. By reclassifying gold as a tier 1 asset, gold was once again remonetized. Then following that was the end of the petrodollar contract with the Saudis, in which at that point, as of today, the dollar is not backed by anything other than the United States government's promise to pay its debt. So here we are, right back to that same scenario that we were in 71. We had high inflation because of all the dollars that were printed to pay for the Vietnam War. Today, we're the closest we've ever been to World War III. The US dollar supply is at record levels. The dollar is officially not backed by anything. And because of this whole dynamic, we're seeing a shift back to a monetary system that is foundationally backed by gold, which is why we're seeing gold prices making record new highs.
Right now, I'm offering my followers in the trenches this incredible one-time opportunity to credit your account up to $10,000 in free gold and silver on a qualifying purchase. That's right, this will help you get started protecting your wealth with real physical gold and silver while these historic price levels are still within reach. Go to O'KeefeMediaGold.com, that's O'KeefeMediaGold.com, or call 833-324-4653, 833-324-GOLD. Again, that's O'KeefeMediaGold.com or 833-324-GOLD. Take action, get the facts, and protect your future, because freedom isn't given, it's secured. This is James O'Keefe. Don't just watch history, own a piece of it. What is your price? Because if your price is not your life, then you are for sale.